One bright day, Apollo, the god of light and prophecy, stumbled upon Cupid in a peaceful meadow. Amused by Cupid's small bow and slender arrows, Apollo laughed and said, "What harm could such tiny weapons possibly bring? Archery is a skill for gods of strength, not for playful children like you." Cupid, insulted by Apollo's arrogance, decided to teach him a lesson. Reaching into his quiver, he selected 2 arrows. One was golden, gleaming with the magic to ignite a deep, unshakable love. The other was dull, made of lead, carrying the power to inspire rejection and coldness. With deliberate aim, Cupid fired the golden arrow, striking Apollo's heart. Instantly, Apollo was consumed with a passionate love for the nymph Daphne. Then Cupid fired the leaden arrow at Daphne, ensuring she would reject all romantic advances. Satisfied with his work, Cupid flew off, leaving Apollo trapped in a painful, one-sided love. Struck by Cupid's golden arrow, Apollo was overcome with an intense and uncontrollable love for Daphne, a nymph of unparalleled beauty and grace. Her flowing hair, serene demeanor, and effortless elegance captivated him entirely. His thoughts became consumed by her, and he yearned to win her heart at any cost. Every moment away from Daphne felt like an eternity to Apollo. He followed her through the forests, calling out to her, praising her beauty and virtues. "Daphne, my love, you are as radiant as the sun itself," he would exclaim. "Why do you run from me? Let me show you the depths of my devotion." Yet, Daphne, unaware of the divine forces at play, was unmoved by Apollo's advances. Her heart remained distant, untouched by his words or charm. Still, Apollo refused to give up. His obsession grew, and he vowed to pursue her endlessly, unable to accept a love that was not returned. Struck by Cupid's leaden arrow, Daphne developed an intense aversion to love. Unlike others, who sought companionship and romance, she recoiled from the very idea. Love, in her eyes, was a force that could bind her, taking away her freedom. Instead, she devoted her life to chastity, aligning herself with Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and virginity. Daphne spent her days in the forests, roaming freely, her bow always in hand, and her heart untouched. She found peace in solitude and in the company of nature, far from the constraints of love. Her beauty, however, drew many suitors, but Daphne rejected them all. They would profess their admiration, offer gifts, and declare their devotion, yet she remained indifferent. "I belong to Artemis, not to any man," she would say firmly. Love had no place in her life. Daphne cherished her independence above all, untouched by the desires that others so eagerly sought. Despite Daphne's clear rejection, Apollo was relentless in his pursuit. His heart, struck by Cupid's golden arrow, burned with an uncontrollable love for her. He could not understand why she resisted him, and so he followed her wherever she went. With every step, he declared his deep affection, praising her beauty and telling her how perfect they could be together. But Daphne, terrified and repulsed, fled further into the woods, her heart pounding with fear. She didn't want his love or his praise. To her, Apollo's relentless pursuit was nothing but an unwelcome reminder of her vulnerability. She wanted only to remain free, untouched by love. "No, Apollo, I do not want your affection," she cried, but her words fell on deaf ears. Apollo, blinded by his feelings, could not bear to let her go. He continued to chase her, his desire growing stronger with each passing moment, while Daphne's fear only deepened. Daphne ran through the dense forest, her feet pounding the soft earth as she tried to escape Apollo's chase. The trees stretched high above her, their branches intertwining to create a maze of shadows, but Apollo was relentless. His love, fueled by desire and longing, made him tireless. Daphne, no matter how fast she ran, could feel him drawing closer. Her breath became shallow and ragged as the distance between them closed. She had always been swift, but the fear that drove her only made her more exhausted. Her legs felt heavy, her body aching from the effort to outrun him. Yet, Apollo's steps remained close, his voice echoing through the trees, calling to her, pleading with her to stop. She could hear him almost on top of her, his presence like a shadow she couldn't escape. With each passing moment, Daphne's hope of outrunning him began to fade. The forest, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap closing in around her. The pursuit seemed endless. Exhausted and desperate, Daphne's strength began to fail her as she felt Apollo's presence closing in. Realizing she could no longer outrun him, fear surged through her. With no other option, she cried out to her father, Peneus, the river god. Her voice trembled as she pleaded for help, for a way to escape the relentless pursuit of Apollo. "Father," she cried, her voice echoing through the trees. "Grant me your protection. Save me from this fate. I do not wish for love, but for freedom. Help me, please, to escape his grasp." Her words were filled with desperation, and in the depths of her plea, she begged for any form of salvation. She couldn't bear the thought of surrendering to Apollo, whose love was so consuming it threatened to overwhelm her. As her cries echoed, she felt the river god's power stir. Her only hope now rested in the hands of her father, the god of the river, to grant her the protection she so desperately sought. As Daphne's cries reached the heavens, her father, Peneus, heard her desperate plea. Moved by his daughter's terror and despair, he decided to answer her call in the only way he could. With a wave of his hand, the river god began to transform her. Daphne's body stiffened as her limbs elongated, turning into smooth, sturdy branches. Her delicate hair shifted, transforming into glossy green leaves that fluttered in the wind. Her feet, once swift and light, became rooted into the earth, no longer able to run. The transformation was complete. Daphne, once a beautiful nymph, was now a majestic laurel tree. Her skin turned to bark, and her voice faded into the rustling of leaves. Apollo, who had been just moments away from reaching her, stopped in his tracks. In horror and awe, he watched as his beloved Daphne disappeared before his eyes, her beauty forever preserved in the form of a tree. Although Apollo's love remained, he could no longer pursue her. Apollo arrived just as Daphne's transformation was complete. He stood there, paralyzed with sorrow, staring at the laurel tree where she had once stood. The beautiful nymph he had chased, now forever bound to the earth. Her limbs had turned to branches, and her hair, once flowing, had transformed into leaves. The soft rustling of her new form seemed to echo her rejection. Devastated, Apollo approached the tree, his heart heavy with grief. He reached out, gently wrapping his arms around the trunk, as though trying to hold on to the love that could never be. "Daphne," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I loved you with all my heart, but now you are forever beyond me." He wept, mourning not only the loss of her love but also the life they could have had together. In that moment, Apollo realized that even though their love was unfulfilled, he would carry it with him forever. He promised the tree that it would be honored, its leaves forever a symbol of his eternal love and sorrow. To honor Daphne, Apollo declared the laurel tree sacred. Overcome with grief and love, he vowed to carry her memory for eternity. As a symbol of his devotion, Apollo crowned himself with the laurel leaves, the delicate green now resting upon his brow. He promised that the tree, which had once been Daphne, would forever represent triumph and eternal glory. From that moment on, the laurel became a sacred emblem. Apollo, the god of light, would wear it in his hair, and it would be awarded to victors in both mortal and divine contests. Laurel wreaths adorned the heads of heroes, athletes, and poets, as a reminder of honor, achievement, and the deep love Apollo had for Daphne. The laurel's significance grew with time, and it became a mark of everlasting success, linking it forever to Apollo's eternal grief and admiration. As the laurel leaves rustled in the wind, they whispered the story of love unfulfilled, yet immortalized through the sacred tribute of a god to a nymph. The laurel tree became a lasting symbol of victory in ancient Greece, forever linked to the tragic tale of Apollo and Daphne. As a tribute to Daphne's transformation, Apollo declared the laurel sacred, and it became a powerful emblem of triumph and honor. In ancient Greece, poets crowned themselves with laurel wreaths to honor their creativity and excellence, drawing inspiration from the god Apollo, who was both the god of poetry and the sun. Athletes, too, were honored with laurel crowns after their victories in the Olympic Games, symbolizing their strength and skill. Military leaders and rulers also adopted the laurel as a sign of their conquests and achievements, ensuring their legacy was linked to success. Over time, the laurel's connection to victory grew, and it became a universal symbol of glory, wisdom, and honor. Through these uses, the memory of Daphne's escape and Apollo's unrequited love was preserved, allowing their story to live on in the laurel's leaves, which continued to honor victory and achievement for generations.